So the first major balance pass and update for Space Marine 2 has landed, and as usual, the community is torn between the evil elitists, the sweat lords, the tryhards, the no-lifers on one side, and the scrub-a-dub noob tubers, the casuals, and the skillless wiener butts on the other. In that series of tubes called the internet, where nuance and reasoned discussion go to die, you're either in the camp that this patch was amazing for the game and turned an unplayable, impossible, and downright unfun mess on Ruthless entirely around, or that Space Marine 2 has become a piss-easy game for children that my 2-year-old niece, who can barely formulate sentences, could breeze through now. Is either side right, or is the truth somewhere in the middle? Well, after playing a bunch of operation missions yesterday, including some solo Tzeentch runs, I want to share my overall thoughts on the patch and on the trajectory of Space Marine 2, so let's get into it. If you have not been following the news, the update yesterday added private lobbies, the hub sparring arena, some new HUD functionality for enemy spawns and threat indicators, and a whole bunch of balance tweaks designed to hit the major pain points of the community and make us feel more like Space Marines. A major complaint from players obviously has been that the power fantasy of Astartes has not been fully realized, at least with lower level weapons, and that a combination of absurdly spongy enemies and barely functional armor made us feel weaker than we should, in a way that was perhaps unbecoming of one who has crossed the Rubicon Primaris. In response, enemy range damage was reduced across the board, a bunch of Tzeentch units were given less health and less burst potential, and the ability for minorous enemies to penetrate your armor was curtailed significantly, which means when you're in the middle of a horde, you're going to be a lot more survivable, particularly on classes like Assault. On that front, mission was certainly accomplished. It is a great thing that Tzeentch maps are more fun and less frustrating to play now. I don't think there's any question that enemy shooting, armor functionality, Zongor shields, and the general sponginess of certain enemy types required some tweaking. The Power Fist and Ground Pound got some hefty buffs. Zongors are no longer cosplaying as Captain America with a vibranium shield, and for a lot of people, myself included, the update essentially opened up 3 more operations. Before, you'd see a ton of decapitation and a ton of inferno. Now you'll be seeing a lot more Reliquary, Vox Liberatus, and Fall of Atreus, because those were the Tzeentch maps, and now Tzeentch is less frustrating to fight. What was interesting to me, though, was seeing such a major shift in how runs feel and function this early in the game's life cycle. It is rare to see design philosophy and the balance pendulum swing so hard in the first 30 days or so. I mean, for Helldivers 2, it took like 8-9 months of pushing and pulling to get to the point of the last major update where everything got Omega buffed. And while this update yesterday wasn't quite that dramatic, it does feel substantially different now in terms of the core gameplay loop. Number one, before we get into that, people are going to want different things from Space Marine 2, and that is okay. It is not elitist to want to be challenged and to derive fun and pleasure from being overwhelmed and put on the back foot, but somehow clawing your way out of hell to grind out a win. And it also doesn't make you a noob or a shitter to want Primaris armor to be able to absorb more than 3 scratches from a Gaunt or Zongor before failing, or for 75 caliber mini rockets to behave as such, to explode faces more easily when up against sometimes very spongy enemies. I think there is an element of truth to the fact that certain bolt weapons at early levels don't hit as hard as maybe they should. Finding that balance is going to be difficult. It's going to be a constant battle for the devs, and that is okay. I think the point of this update was to provide a new baseline that at its core was more fun and fulfilled that power fantasy better, encouraging more build diversity and making the gameplay loop less frustrating, and in that I think the devs did a pretty good job. That in coming updates in the future can be expanded upon with more waves, more extremist spawns, more brutal combinations where bosses and ambient enemies stack up and attack together, which will hopefully be what lethal difficulty entails when it comes. Instead of making enemies even tankier, that it focuses on reducing downtime, sending in more waves, and combining Terminus and special spawns with those waves in a real attempt to overrun the player. Because that is where difficulty really ratchets up a notch, right? When you've got a Carnifex and 2 Lictors and a double wave all coming at you at the same time. That's exactly what Darktide does with High Intensity Shock Troop Gauntlet. Do I think the game got even easier on Ruthless after the update? Hell yes. There's no question in my mind this game is easier now. Is that because I'm some god gamer that's way better than all you plebs? No, I don't even play on mouse and keyboard. I have aim assist turned off. Pad controller is objectively worse for aiming than mouse and keyboard. I am not sweating when I play this game. I'm not doing everything in my power to dominate it. I'm good at Space Marine 2, as I was at Gears of War and other third-person shooters like it, but definitely not the best, and I won't try to be. With that said, though, with the new changes, a game that was already fairly easy for competent teams has gotten even easier. And I think a lot of players who were regularly clearing Ruthless before now believe it is too easy, with all these changes coming simultaneously all at once. And I'm of the mind that if the devs wanted to make all these changes simultaneously, it would have been good to have lethal difficulty ready, or at the very least have an explanation of what it is in the blog post, what the general philosophy and balancing behind it is going to be when it comes, so they can start to gather feedback, and a more specific time frame for when it is actually coming. Because like I said, as a new baseline for balance, this update addressed a ton of pain points and will absolutely make the game more accessible and enjoyable for a lot of people. But just like casual should be catered to an extent, so should the Ruthless players who are looking for a challenge, and I think both can be catered to in their own ways. Both can be addressed. So, we are still in early stages. I am not worried. It's only been a month. I think the devs are doing a good job, but certainly not a perfect one. Servers are a prime example. Again, I have not personally had many server-related issues outside trying to run 3 stacks in Eternal War, but the fact that people are still getting stuck in black screen, join in progress infinite loops for operations and Eternal War is really bad and needs to get sorted, and I don't think the update did anything on that front at all, which is kind of crazy considering I think it's one of the major pain points for a lot of people. From a design perspective, I personally think gating progression for relic weapons behind Ruthless was the wrong move from the get-go. Anytime a dev puts a shiny new hat, much less actual functional weapons, gated behind a certain level of difficulty, it will automatically attract people who are not ready for that difficulty, who are just looking to get carried before learning the mechanics or, getting good at the game. It would not be a big deal if 2 or 3 armory datas could be combined to make a gold one, or so on. That kind of thing that allows someone who plays lower difficulties to still progress and unlock those final tier weapons. That would have immediately alleviated some of those concerns and lessened the pressure for enemy and mechanics nerfs that we've obviously been seeing on Reddit and Discord over the last several weeks, and without question made an impact on the devs and their changes here. Moving forward, lethal difficulty should probably not have anything of value to unlock, because we'll just circle back to the same topic yet again, where players who can't complete it want to play it to unlock the shiny new toy, and then make balance complaints to the devs to make it easier when they can't complete it. Treat it like Cataclysm or High Intensity Shock Troop Gauntlet in the Tide series. It's going to be there for the challenge and the fun of it, not for the unlocks or rewards. On the same topic of balance, there have been some incredibly mind-numbingly stupid posts on the subreddit and Discord, which is nothing new. Normally, I wouldn't feel the need to address this, but there was a particularly egregious example yesterday. You probably saw it. Some dude took a white tier heavy bolter into Ruthless, shot a warrior a bunch of times in the toes, missed, half his shots, and was complaining he was shooting Nerf bullets despite not hitting the head at all in a game where you get a 4 times multiplier for hitting headshots, right? Kinda silly. He also had his Iron Halo off cooldown and was standing there as he was getting absolutely shredded by Tyranid Devourers, and it was very obvious he was a new player. Didn't really know what he was talking about. That's okay. It's okay to be a new player, but if you're really new and not particularly good at the game yet, you probably should not have very strong balanced takes that then get 3,000 upvotes on Reddit. The idea behind his post was not entirely wrong. We've already discussed how low tier weapons take a while to get going and how enemies can feel a bit too spongy considering the power of Primaris weaponry, and there's no question that's true for the heavy bolter. It does start out slow, and it is not a Majora's killing weapon initially, but it was a very misleading post. It was an ignorant post that happened to generate like 3,000 upvotes and make it to the top of the subreddit for hours before it was finally deleted either by mods or by the guy who posted it. I'm not sure which. That kind of shit deserves to get made fun of, deserve to get deleted. Now you may not think that's a big deal, but posts like that make a big impact on the general discourse for the game, and when newer, inexperienced players see that, they'll often parrot those kinds of viewpoints and unintentionally help to spread misinformation despite not really knowing better. The heavy bolter is actually a really good weapon that can deal with mixed hordes quite efficiently, that it is fully capable of not only providing the most damage on a competent team, but that it feels fun and provides that power fantasy that people want if you're playing with the correct weapon on the correct difficulty and playing it correctly. And honestly, I was rocking green tier heavy bolter yesterday on Ruthless Tyranid and Tzeentch maps, and it still felt fine. I was still able to complete the vast majority of missions I ran with it while killing lots and lots of enemies. And of course, it only got better from there into purple and gold tier, where it really becomes a powerful weapon that is satisfying to use. Was it amazing at green tier on Ruthless? No, of course not, but it's not meant to be. That's why we have difficulty options and why we have progression. So if that was like a 50 upvote post, whatever. People have bad balance takes all the time. That's not newsworthy. Some of y'all certainly aren't going to agree with me all the time. That's fine too. No biggie, it's the internet. But when it becomes one of the most upvoted posts in an entire week for a game that's only been out a month, and it's just super misleading, that's annoying, and frankly does more harm than good. Which also cycles back to the topic of nerfing. I do think the Helldivers fiascos have rotted people's brains to an extent that anything that is even slightly construed as a nerf now is a sign of the end times and the devs being out of touch. The amount of people I saw crying that the grenade launcher was nuked from orbit because you now can't sit on an infinite ammo cache and spam explosives forever was too damn high. The bolt rifle with grenade launcher is still amazing in this patch. In fact, it was barely touched, and I'd argue it's literally the best tactical weapon still. Better than Melta. The devs didn't get rid of resupplying from drop pods. They didn't get rid of resupplying a full rack of nades from Emperor's Vengeance after killing Majoris every 30 seconds. They didn't get rid of resupplying from normal ammo pickups. All they did was prevent you from spamming infinite nades on objectives that are designed to be challenging. Do you know what one of the most common cheats on Space Marine 2 is right now? It's infinite nades. So are we really going to complain that the devs might not want that in the game? Is it really necessary for your enjoyment? And if you've seen videos of that cheat, you'll know why it's not necessary. It's very silly. Is it fun as a melee boy to try and charge into the fray on an objective where you're getting swarmed, to lay about with your Thunderhammer or Power Sword, only to find every target around you instantly evaporate because some dude's launching infinite noob tubes from across the map? No, not really. That's not a very healthy thing for class balance or other people's fun. And if your infinite nades are hurting my enjoyment, that is very obviously something that should be fixed. I'm never going to be able to change people's minds on this, obviously, but for the sake of your own mental health, people really need to stop melting down the second they see anything that isn't a straight buff, without making any attempt to understand why that change was made or why it could be a good thing for the game. It is so common to see, really in any game nowadays, these minor, reasonable nerfs, then huge, over-the-top, dramatic backlash because communities have realized that bullying works and that nerfs sometimes don't feel good. Sometimes that bullying is deserved, but not over little stuff like this. Infinite nades don't need to be in the game. We don't need to have meltdowns about it. When it comes to the topic of Eternal War, I think the balance there has actually been surprisingly good. Not perfect, but good. There's a couple things that are slightly OP. I think some people would argue shot grenades are a little bit over the top right now, especially with combos with the Invis Sniper SMG, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to pass any judgment on that. I haven't used it too much yet. But unfortunately, in Eternal War, not much has happened in this update to change it at all, except to nerf Vanguard. I actually don't think Vanguard was a huge problem. The class's niche is to flank hard and find favorable 1v1s with his good mobility, and if he caught you solo, you might be in trouble. Thing is, that was his niche, what he's really good at and what he was designed to be from the ground up, a 1v1 specialist with a good speed and mobility. But he's countered really hard by one simple thing, being close to one teammate. That's very easy to do, right? And something you should always be doing anyway in a team-based shooter like this one. He has a short-range, high DPS SMG essentially with very little armor. If he hooks you and you have a teammate nearby, whether you got stunned or not is pretty much irrelevant. He won't be able to kill you before you both kill him. 2 players DPS better than 1 DPS. Simple. So the only time Vanguard feels oppressive is in those pure 1v1 situations, which is where he should shine the most. If you get caught out in a pure 1v1, you're not automatically dead, but there's a good chance you're going to lose the fight, and that's okay. That is his role. I'm a little nervous the change to his grappling hook has hurt that niche and identity too much. Will require some more testing and playtime, but if a max range grapple can now instantly get punished while you're still in transit, flying through the air, that's going to feel really bad. And I don't know that I agree with the fact that if I grapple someone, they should just be able to shoot me while I'm closing in a 1v1. And honestly, I don't think Vanguard was in some ridiculously broken state in PvP. Overall, it was an interesting patch. I think there were some nice changes, especially in regards to Tzeentch, but I would like to see a follow-up soon that increases waves and special frequency, especially as it pertains to the coming lethal difficulty that provides the challenge and excitement some of us would like to see. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll see you all in the next video. Indie Pride, signing out for now. Have a good one, guys.